Good morning. It is 11:10 a.m. on Sunday, April 29th, 2018. I'm Christiana Ellis, and I just got up. This is 5 more minutes. It is Sunday, so I am going to be doing my rewatch of Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex with episode 24, Sunset in the Lonely City, Annihilation. This is the third to last episode of this season, so things are definitely ramping up and changing the status quo and all of those things, ending on a cliffhanger even. So I think that in some ways it may not actually take that long to talk about the episode because there's a fair amount of action in it, as opposed to lots of plot complexity, because it also leaves a lot of stuff unresolved. But essentially, where we're at now is Section 9 has solved the mystery. They know essentially now what the conspiracy was, who was responsible, why did they do it, and now what might they try to do to cover it up is the only ongoing question. Oh, tea is so good. Although this particular tea, this is a total change of subject. I forgot that this particular tea has little bits in it that are too small for the holes of my little strainer here, and so they ended up floating around in the cup. But that's okay because it's still good. So it's time for Section 9 to make its move. But the problem, of course, and we kind of briefly addressed this at the end of the last episode, is that when the ringleader of this conspiracy you've uncovered is the Secretary General of the country, I mean, he's not literally the number one political figure, but he's pretty high up there. And you're certainly within the realm of stuff that's going to be political as opposed to just judicial. It's not enough that he's guilty, because the ramifications of his guilt and doing something about it is complex. And my iPad just made a noise. I'm very distracted this morning. So basically, Aramaki is ready to make their move to take their evidence to the Prime Minister and hopefully have the Secretary General removed and arrested, right, for this conspiracy. But even before they can get there to do that, apparently the Secretary General has made a move of his own. He's become aware of Section 9's involvement in uncovering this whole thing, and so he has taken his own steps to leak Section 9's existence to the press and some of their various acts, including the recent kidnapping of Serrano, Mr. Serrano, implying that means that they were also involved with the original Laughing Man thing, certainly tying their existence to a very public mystery and implying, these top secret organizations acting on their own authority, who knows what they're doing, they're a glorified death squad, that sort of thing. One of the interesting nuances of this episode, though, I think, is that all of the criticisms made against Section 9 when it's released and why the public is concerned about them, I mean, all of those are actually fairly reasonable criticisms. It's like, because Section 9 are the heroes in this show, and we know them, and we know how seriously they take trying to do the right thing, and that they don't abuse their power, that doesn't mean that in real life we would be okay with that type of government agency operating with no accountability. And or no perceived accountability, because again, we know that not only is there accountability, but, Aramaki takes it very seriously. But that said, they do have an awful lot of power that they perform tasks with relatively little supervision. So I think it's interesting that a lot of the complaints about why Section 9 shouldn't exist are not unreasonable. But in any event, it's definitely a move to discredit them before they can discredit the Secretary General. Aramaki still manages to make it to the Prime Minister to show their evidence, and this is where the politics comes in. And the Prime Minister essentially tells him they blow past this bit very quickly, so you would certainly be forgiven for not entirely following that conversation. But the gist of it is this. We've got elections coming up, and if I were to try to do this and use your evidence to remove the Secretary General now, that would disrupt my ability to control the outcome of the next election. It would perhaps reduce my ability to act in other ways that I can't afford right now. And so, in fact, in order to deal with this leak of your existence, I'm going to have to use this new law that got passed, Special Forces Restriction Bill. I'm going to have to use it to essentially eliminate your group in order to maintain political control of the situation. And Aramaki has to make do with a half-assed promise of, but don't worry, after the election, I'll take care of you. And so Aramaki is pretty unhappy with that answer and that development, of course, but at the same time, there's no one higher to appeal to. So it's like, if this is the Prime Minister's decision, like what other option is there? And so Aramaki is in this tricky situation of saying, they're going to take apart my group one way or another, and maybe the Prime Minister will keep his word afterwards, and maybe he won't, but resisting this order is the only way to guarantee that he won't. So basically he warns the Major that the headquarters is going to get raided, and tells them all to survive no matter what. And because he very correctly assumes that this raid that's supposedly to just take in Section 9 is probably going to be used as an assassination mission, because the Secretary General is wanting to cover up and kill anybody who knows what's going on. So that's why Aramaki has to tell them to survive. And so we end up with the episode includes a lot of action of the Major and the rest of Section 9 doing their best to survive this raid, including a faked suicide attempt where they blow up a bunch of generic prosthetic bodies, hoping to delay everything. We get to see them firing some great big guns, but unfortunately now that armored suit that we fought one of a couple of episodes ago, now they've got 6 of them and a bunch of other soldiers all attacking at the same time. And it's like, we can't really fight them off. We have to try to run away. And so we have the Major, before leaving, giving little tiny data chips to Patsu and Boma and telling them, leak this information to the press so that we know that they can't completely cover up the evidence of what the Secretary General did. And then basically survive. And she tells everyone, Section 9 is disbanded. Everyone, we're going to go our separate ways. And we see Aramaki and Togusa get taken in. We see Togusa frustrated because, even though Aramaki warned the Major, Togusa, he probably rightly figured there's no way Togusa is getting away, and the less he knows, the better. Maybe he can go back to being a regular police officer if he's not too tainted by all of this. And so, unfortunately, that means leaving Togusa in the dark about a lot of stuff, and that makes him unhappy. But we see Togusa getting taken in. One of the police officers kicks him, kicks a door into him, car door, a little rough. But and then we see him being interrogated by the police afterwards. But he and Aramaki are the only ones taken into custody that we see here. But then everyone else, having escaped from the other building after big giant shootout and explosions and all of that stuff, we see Patsu and Boma separating in sort of a deserted alley, and then we unfortunately see camouflaged soldiers pursuing Boma after they split up, and we hear gunfire off camera, but we don't know if he's okay or not. But we're left to infer that maybe not. And then we also see Patsu go down to this little secret safe house club that we've seen the Major go down into looking for information before. And unfortunately, we hear that the enemy soldiers are a step ahead of him, and and they apprehend Patsu as well. But with the secret wrinkle that Patsu is able to pass this little information chip that he's got to the bartender, who is maybe still willing to to pass that along. It's warm in here. Okay, so then we have Patsu and Boma. Patsu taken in, Boma unknown, but certainly not. Wasn't looking good when we last saw him. And then we don't really see what happens with Saito. But we get a nice long conversation between the Major and Bato as they go to leave, where Bato is frustrated with the Major that she doesn't act more upset about all of this, about having to go on the run, about Section 9 breaking up. But she's pretty glib about all of it. She tries to make it sound like, well, all Section 9 really was a deal that let us get the hot, top shelf maintenance on a regular basis. We'll just have to find somewhere else where we can get that. And he keeps trying to probe for other things that she'll miss, like will they have to change their appearance? And for example, he observes this little watch that we've seen her deal with. And she claims to have, for all days, for her to have left it at the safe house is frustrating, because the implication is, well, you can't go back there. It's too dangerous. So is it lost? And she basically implies that, no big deal. I was already going to change my appearance. Well, I'll just change my memories too, so I won't miss it. And this all's kind of frustrating to Bato, because he's feeling this more painfully, and he's a little bit frustrated with her that she's acting like none of this is a big deal. Which is setting tension up for, continuing the story, right? But as we leave it, the Major runs off essentially just saying, even if we ever meet again, I might not be the same person I am now. Which, for us who can't do things like alter memories and stuff like that, it's kind of a little bit disappointing. I mean, we feel like it's supposed to hurt that Section 9's breaking up, and her acting like it doesn't is frustrating. And so what we see and what we finish the episode with is Bato going to his own safe house, retrieving some weapons, and basically concluding, this is my own life. How I decide to waste it is my own damn business. Which I think we're meant to infer means he was told, essentially, go on the run, and he's thinking maybe he wants to take the fight to the enemy instead. We'll see. So that'll do it for this episode, and we'll be back next week to talk about the penultimate episode of the season, and we're getting close to the end. So I'll leave it there for today and talk to you tomorrow for 5 more minutes.